Yo, what's going on, everybody? This is Michael Thomas with Modem Solutions. I hope that you are in the best of spirits. And I just wanted to have a conversation with you. We're in the season of love. Currently, as I'm recording this today, it's Valentine's Day. But I think the message of what I'm going to talk about is evergreen, regardless of Valentine's Day. And one of the things that I want to talk about, I think, is a very important conversation that we've been having in society as a whole, especially as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion types of initiatives that we aim to have within business and corporate type settings in the boardroom on anybody who's sitting at the table to ensure that there's inclusion, equity, diversity, that there's access. And I think that we could all agree that diversity is incredibly important so that we limit our blind spots. And when we limit our blind spots, that means that we're allowing new information into a conversation that we can see clearly enough to create solutions that actually work within the context of that situation. And I think that having diversity of thought is incredibly important, especially when it comes to seeing opportunities, investment opportunities, so on and so forth. Quite honestly, for me personally, some of the biggest investment opportunities that I've invested in has been because of my diversity of friendships or people that I am associates with or just respect. And I follow them, I engage with them, I talk to them, I seek to learn more about what they do, why they do it, why they love it, and what's happening in their particular industry and career field. Because if, for instance, my background is in accounting and financial planning, I have a PhD in financial planning from the University of Georgia. And if I just hung out with financial planners, I wouldn't understand what's happening in terms of engineering. If I just hung out with financial planners, I wouldn't know what's happening necessarily in medicine and in science in general, especially some of the recent developments in how we've created the vaccines that we're using without actually needing COVID, but actually being able to have the science where we can create something without actually needing the thing to create the vaccine, which is revolutionary. And we've been able to establish that, get that to market in record times. That's pretty amazing. Or individuals who are in any particular field, whatever it may be, by me engaging with those people and being literally intellectually curious about what they do and what's happening in their space, in their field, and what's coming that I would not see because it would be a blind spot for me, has allowed for me to explore opportunities and to see opportunities that I wouldn't have been able to see otherwise. And I think for any of you who work in a team setting or a group setting and you're working together and everyone feels accepted, everyone feels as if their voice has weight, then that creates a space for diversity of thought, regardless of race, ethnicity, and all these other different things. We're just creating a foundation for diversity of thought. Then when we start to add these other layers in context, it makes it so much richer when we do. And I think, generally speaking, we can all agree that this is an effective strategy if you are a business owner, not to just have people who look like you sitting at the table, because then it's not about change. It's not about providing the best service. It's not about literally being the best and eliminating blind spots. It's about control and it's about power. Because when we devalue diversity, then what we're saying is that we want things to stay the same. We want to maintain status quo. So my question to you is this, as I was thinking about this, and we can so clearly see it in the media and in society and in publications and reports and things of that nature. But how are you addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion in your household? Hmm. I know this is going to rub some people the wrong way. How are you being intentional about diversity, equity, and inclusion when it comes to your partner in the way that you all manage money, or the way that you talk about money, or the way that you engage with money. It's so easy. Like, catch this, it's so easy from the outside looking in to speak disparagingly of companies and organizations that don't embrace equity, diversity, and inclusion. But yet, very few of us will look inwardly to think about, well, what are we doing in our households? And from my perspective, diversity, equity, and inclusion actually would work better if it happened from the inside out. Because if this is the value system that we are communicating, that we're modeling, that we are maintaining within our households in the way that we engage with each other, and that just becomes a standard of practice, then it becomes a very natural thing that transitions into business, into communities, and so on and so forth, because it is an idea or ideal that we respect. So my question to you, as we think about Valentine's Day and all these other different things that go on, love and romance and all that jazz, and more specifically money, is, are you being inclusive? Right, inclusive here. When it comes to conversations about money within your household. And when I say inclusive, I mean, are you being inviting, welcoming, and warm, and for your partner, and saying, hey, I want you to come to the table. Not even at the table. Let's not even say a table, because the table a lot of times creates a barrier, artificial barrier, that could be representative of an actual barrier that's transpiring or happening between the two of you. But let's say, hey, let's go sit on the couch. Let's take a walk together because I want to include you. I want you to be a part of, because I value you and your voice. So how inclusive are we being within our households in terms of having these conversations that we need to have about money, financial well-being, and where we aspire to go together as a couple, right? So we have inclusiveness, and this should be undergirded by acceptance, right? Warmth, intention, and in setting, right? How are we creating a setting for someone to feel accepted within a particular space? And if you have others that you think, please listen, like what could make being inclusive or encouraging inclusiveness more effective and powerful? I'd love to hear your voice, because again, I don't have all the answers, but I feel that if we all work together inclusively, diversity-wise, and equitably, I think that we can get there. And then the next question is, how equitable are your conversations about money? And when I think about equitable, or when I think about equity, I think about weight or weights, right? So if you think about a business and someone who owns a business, and you have partners, you may have someone who has a 70% stake in a business, maybe someone who has a 20% stake in a business, and another person who has a 10% stake in a business. That means that their weights aren't necessarily equitable in a sense that they have equal weight and equal voice when it comes to the table. Now, mind you, when you, in a business setting and things of that nature, and there's leadership and there's things that there's ultimately someone who, in many instances, has to make the final decision, and they assume the accountability from making a set decision. But when we're inclusive and we're bringing someone to the table, and I know you all have been there, where you've been invited to be a part of a conversation, but your voice really didn't matter. You were just meeting a quota. You were there, but your voice didn't matter, right? So when we include someone into a conversation about money, right? Am I being appreciative of their contributions? Am I encouraging their contributions? Encouraging, right? Am I celebrating their contributions? And am I actively listening? And when we actively listen, literally, what we're doing is that we're asking questions, We're wanting to dive deeper. We want to understand where that person is coming from, why they see it as being important, how this potentially could be something that can make us better, especially from the context of a relationship. And in celebrating, encouraging, and appreciating more of the same. Because what happens a lot of times within relationships is that, one, we're not being inclusive. And then two, if we're inclusive, we're not being equitable and we're not applying similar weights in terms of the value of someone else's opinion. So if we do that, the person doesn't feel appreciated, the person doesn't feel encouraged, celebrated, and they don't feel listened to. So now they feel like they're at the table, but it doesn't matter. So why should I divulge any information and help you out when you don't really care about me? So how inclusive, because being inclusive, you can invite somebody to the table, but you could be very dismissive of them once they've gotten to the table. Because the only reason you want them there is to save face, right? So not only do we have to focus on being inclusive, but then we also have to focus on being equitable in terms of letting this person know that your voice has weight, right? See, we can see this very clearly from a business standpoint. We can see this very clearly from a board standpoint, but within our relationship, do we see it this way? Okay, like, I'm giving y'all the keys. I don't even know if y'all see it. And I'm doing this for free. These are the keys. And then the last thing is that when somebody is invited, right, we create the setting, we're intentional, we're warm, we're accepting. We give them weight. Then the power happens. Then we get diversity. Right? And once we have diversity, what diversity does is that when someone feels included and accepted and appreciated, right? Diversity gives us new thought, which is the power of all of this, right? Diversity gives us new thought, new angles, new ideas, new and fresh perspectives to view something in a way where we now have a more complete picture and view of what we're trying to address. And because we have these things, they lead to solutions, right? And these solutions, right? And these solutions aren't just from a business perspective. These solutions happen from a relational perspective. So if there's something that you're trying to fix or solve or resolve within a context of your relationship, in being inclusive of your partner and in creating the space for inclusivity, then also being equitable in the way that you value them at the table, appreciate, encourage, celebrate, and actively listen, is going to open and untap their human capital. And that's the real capital. Human capital, right? You're untapping your partner's human capital. And if you are rooted in actually trying to solve a solution and to do it in a way where we all win, and this is not about ego, power, and control, then we're accepted of diversity of thought, right? Because otherwise, this is not about this process. This is about making sure that someone agrees with us and that we don't get new thoughts. I'm just trying to conform people to believe what I believe so we can go with the solution that I've established. That's a dynamic of power and control. That is not the intended purpose of this process. It's not the intended purpose of this process in a boardroom or in a business, and it should not be the intended process for families. But the issue is that we can actually embrace this entire process and still get it completely wrong because we're doing this because we're trying to control the narrative. We're trying to maintain and sustain power in the narrative. And as we are warm and inviting, and we give the perception of equity and things of that nature, and we encourage diversity of thought, we're simply doing it sometimes to get people to like us so that they agree ultimately what we want to encourage them in the end. Not because we're trying to tap into their human capital, but we're trying to gain trust so that they follow or they fall in line with our sense of human or with our human capital and our perceptions about the world and the solutions that I had intended at the very beginning I just worked you through this entire process, right, to gain your trust, ultimately to come back to my solution at the very end. And that's what we're really going for, right? And we see this happen in businesses, board meetings, and things of that nature all the time. But I want to step back and say, are we not doing the same thing within our relationships? And if we are doing those things where we give this false sense of inclusiveness, equity, tongue twister, right? Equity, and in diversity, not because we really want to bring these people in or change culture or change process or change paradigms, but we are simply trying to gain their trust so that they fall in line with the pre-existing systems. So in other words, this entire process can be nothing but manipulation. And if you really think about this, we're just as manipulative in our relationships. And what happens is if somebody goes through this entire process and then they realize that this was never about them, but this was all about you, or this was all about the leadership, or whatever it may be, then you've completely shut this entirely down, and then you'll never be able to tap into one of the most precious resources you have. That is the human capital of the person who's sitting across from you. But the beauty is that if we do this with the intent of thinking, we really want new thoughts, and we really want to value the weight of people and their opinions, and we want to create a warm and inviting space for them to do this, you are going to get the new thoughts. You are going to get the new solutions that may be better than your solution, and that is okay. Because if this is about winning, then the best solution goes forward. It's not about power and control and ego. And even some of our best laid plans and intentions as it relates to this can be perverted by our ego, by power, by control. This is actually a barrier because we can think that we're doing the right thing and have the process and systems, all these things to go through this process, but still not have the right spirit in doing this thing. But if we did do this thing or work through this process of being inclusive, equitable, and encouraging diversity and diversity of thought, which is the real power in tapping into the human capital of people around you, because they're going to see things that you can't see, which eliminates your blind spots, which means that you can see more clearly, or you can see clearly, which then leads to solutions that you were never able to see because you didn't know that you had the blind spots to begin with. And that can be the 1% incremental growth that leads to or blossoms to the multi-million-dollar business, or creating the financial legacy and lasting legacy within a household and within a relationship. So my question to you all on Valentine's Day, as you're thinking about your own relationships and you're thinking about the way that you engage in money, and y'all, I'm just being honest with you, I just literally gave you the keys for how to sit down as a family, or even as partners, or even to speak with your children about the spending plan, about the budget. Because a lot of times we don't even have this conversation, but I thought that the conversation around diversity, equity, inclusion, I kind of work it backwards, IED, inclusiveness, equity, and in diversity is kind of the way that I would say is the process that we work it. Because this is all about the person feeling warm, invited, accepted, and creating a space for it. And then equity is being appreciative, encouraging, celebrating, and active listening, which is saying that your voice matters, your voice has weight. And then when people have that type of trust, then they feel comfortable and confident in sharing new ideas and things of that nature that leads to solutions. And then ultimately, if this leads to solutions, we should start this wheel all over again, right? The inclusiveness, acceptance, worth, intention, and then we congratulate and celebrate them for their contribution to the relationship. Not trying to make it seem like, oh, I already knew that. Yeah, I was thinking we should do that too. Yeah, yeah. No, it's like, you know what, babe, I didn't even think about it that way. I think that that's a wonderful idea, and I think that we should run with it. Thank you. I appreciate you. Y'all, I literally just gave you the keys Now, all you need to do is act on it. So my question to you is, as you move forward and you know this information now, right? How are you going to be? Let's even stop thinking about the boardrooms and stop thinking about companies. And let's like make this a thing within households. Let's make this the culture within community. Fellas, let's step up and lead in this particular area, right? And actually, sometimes let's step back and let the people in our lives lead in these particular areas and assume the role of following because we may not have the right solution. And we have the capacity to be able to exchange power. And that's the beauty of power. We don't have power to necessarily to just kind of covet it and just kind of hold on to it and never want to let it go. Is that when real power is understanding that power flows. And when we allow power to flow, then power grows. However, if we just kind of keep power to ourselves, we actually diminish its impact. And we think that just because we're empowered and other people aren't, that we're big. We're really not. We aren't as big as we could be. And when I say big as we can be, I mean exponentially big. If we were able to let go of power, share power, and allow power to help all of us grow collectively, then we all rise together. This very thing can happen within your relationship as you think about money. But you have to check your intentions at the door and make sure that this is not a convoluted process that leads back to you and what you want to do. And you're simply just trying to gain the favor and trust of people to follow you. But legitimately, to start this process about them, about her, about him, and knowing that your greatest growth is relinquishing power and empowering them through a process so that it can lead to solutions that creates more power for all involved. Then the both of you come in on the back end, right? And then you bring other people in. And then you're inclusive and you're equitable and you encourage diversity and you create more power. And then all of you come together, right? This collective idea of power creation and not hoarding it and trying to keep it close to the vest is what it takes to actually have real power. And not only do you have power, because you've rooted this process in empathy, love, trust, and compassion, you have quality of relationship and connections to go with it. And that is the real stunt. So I hope that you got a lot out of this video. I've been kind of sitting on this idea, definitely been working with some other projects that incorporate this idea, but I thought it would be really, really cool on Valentine's Day to think about this dynamic of diversity, equity, inclusion, or I would say inclusion or inclusiveness, equity, and diversity from a relationship standpoint. And probably let's focus on creating the culture within our families and households and communities of this type of process that I think would ultimately start to manifest itself organically in the businesses and organizations that we run. And it's definitely important that we have those conversations at that level as well. So I hope that, again, this was entertaining. It was fun to kind of think about, but I want to challenge you. How can you be other-centered and then create a system or a process when it comes to finances or money, or even your budget or your spending plan, and encourage this type of process every time that you engage with this conversation? And if you do this, I believe, I trust, and I know based on experience that you will then begin to see the type of growth within your relationship and as it relates to money that you've always hoped for. So if you enjoy this, like, subscribe, share, follow us on Instagram. My handle is @Modum Solutions. That's MODOM SOLUTIONS. We'd love to continue to have the conversation with you. Y'all stay blessed. And until next time, you have more power than you think. Own it. Bye.